Greetings, I'm Brian Luce, and I'm coming to you from the University of Arizona Fred Fox School of Music. Special greetings to all my Texas flute brethren. I remember being in your exact shoes many, many years ago doing exactly the same auditions. This is the Karg-Elert Caprice, number 28 in F sharp major. Now, to play that successfully is going to depend on a lot of practice, but some really, really smart fingering. In order to make this easier, just like I mentioned in the previous etudes, having the fingerings in the correct location before you play is really critical. Most of the time, we will, as players, will end up giving up a dynamic, a color, a clarity of note, just simply because we're probably articulating at exactly the same moment that we close the fingers or configure the flute. So in essence, it could sound like, because in slow motion, you would see that the fingers align with the articulations. Therefore, in your practice, I strongly recommend moving the fingers before you articulate. There are several ways of practicing the articulations. Obviously, you're going to play this in a triple tongue fashion just for the lightness and clarity of technique, and also the ability to create dynamic contrast, dynamic directions, and vibrato at those really, really colorful moments that you'd like. But what I would really practice is a great deal of embouchure strength. So 2 articulations, one to get the air moving and one for embouchure strength. So in order to keep the air moving, I strongly encourage practicing the reverse double tongue syllable, which is ku. Now, it's not the most focused articulation. It can be very fuzzy to you, and the room's going to sound very boisterous. But the more that you move the fingers before you articulate, the clearer the sound is going to be. Next, in order to, as I tell my students, beat their orbicularis oris muscle into submission, or to really strengthen it, practice by using pu just with the lips articulations. And in that way, by coupling both and getting the strength in place, then when you want to play it up to tempo with the triple tonguing, then the articulation is going to be much clearer. And it also allows on those moments where those articulations are where you can create color to the sound. I think that color, the vibrato, is going to give not only a volume accent, but also an agogic, a length accent too, which is going to give you the ability to play that clearly. Most of this etude is going to require use of, again, that anchor fingering, just like I did in the first etudes. That's going to help a great deal. Obviously, thumb A sharp, in this case, is going to be really, really helpful for most of the etude as well. The second phrase, as you play along, the thumb A sharp works and really helps for that B flat that's going to occur in bar 6. However, you have to make the choice if you want to try to play 1 and 1. For me, I personally always avoid 1 and 1 because the glitch between G and B flat, my rate is very, very high. So I'd much rather use the thumb and then just simply move the thumb offward. When I do place the thumb on that key, I place it so that the thumb is sitting on its side, and then I just barely have to rock it off, and it works really, really clearly. And you can see also at the very, very end of that phrase where I anchored the third finger, it stayed down the entire time. So that's a very, very helpful one. Whenever you have the slurs, and I would really make great hay out of the slurs, so to speak, by giving color on top of that. So that can be really, really helpful, and it also gives a nice shape to the line as we play. The pickup to bar 9 is tricky because you're making this kind of large leap and you're having to drop down to the F sharp. So this is again where I mentioned before in the previous etudes, if you elongate, especially the spine, it's going to help those notes respond. Just by elongating and standing up a little bit taller. The next one, since you just came off of that E natural, by doing that, by simply, again, standing upward, it'll be easier for that E sharp to occur. And then as you move your way upward, as the old saying goes, you want to just simply play down to the high notes. So just squat just a little bit. Use your hamstrings and use your quadriceps to help out with that upper register. The next part of the piece is going to have a combination of lever usage that's going to allow you to keep it clear and clean, but then also, again, as I mentioned before, practice it so that the fingers move before you articulate. That's one of my favorite spots in bar 20, where I play the A natural. You don't have to pick up your A sharp fingering. It can stay down the whole time. That's a nice little practice trick. It helps stabilize the flute. Again, F sharp major is not one of the easiest keys to keep the flute from rocking around, but anytime you can keep more fingers on the flute, the better. As you come off of the B sharp in bar 22 to 23, again, that's another one of those locations where you have a pickup note that you can use a great deal of vibrato color to not only accent the following downbeat, to kind of create the crescendo into it. Those little kind of outliers will give shape to this piece. Otherwise, the piece, especially because he's beamed it in such a way to kind of outline the arpeggiated structure of the piece, but not necessarily the melodic structure of the piece. But because of that, he kind of hides some of the downbeats. So utilize those slurs to really help you kind of create the narrative from one to the next. Now, when we get into the chordal harmonies, and that's what this piece is really based upon, it's chordal harmonies as well as some chromatic intervals. When we get later on, what becomes important, especially obviously from bar 28 through 29, the G sharp to E is one of the trickier intervals. It wants to crack. Obviously, you either are going to pick up your pinky for the top E. That's going to be easier to execute that note by just simply picking up your pinky. You could even practice it if you just want to work your embouchure so that you're using just the embouchure by itself. From bar 28 through 29, the G sharp to E, it's going to be important for you to pick up your pinky so that the E doesn't crack when you play those two quartal harmonies, those chordal arpeggios that happen afterward. Now, one of the spots that probably demands the most practice is going to be in bar 32. And it's just simply because we're going into the fourth octave, which is always a combination of differing harmonic fingerings. That's really what they're based upon. That's why they don't seem to sometimes make rhyme or reason. But there are a couple ways you can make some really quick, simple little harmonic changes that will make this easier to play. You're really not going to change anything in bar 31. But when we get to the third 16th in bar 33, we're going to play that as our regular A sharp. But the fourth note, the D sharp, you can play as an A flat with that same trill key down. You'll get the same D sharp. It's slightly thinner, but not enough to really be noticeable when you're playing in context. And then when you play the B, you can much easier get over to the B natural. Otherwise, you have to play, which has a lot of finger recovery time when you play that. And actually, there's even one more shortcut if you'd like, because all flutes can play a top B with just the left hand 1, 3, and thumb B natural fingerings. So you could play in 32, which would save any finger recovery time in the right hand. And then you get back to your chordal harmony from one to the next. So that's a really effective finger strategy. It keeps everything simple in the first bar. And in that way you can have the speed and you're not going to worry about recovery. Recovery problems in fingerings are sometimes when the flute wiggles around and then we deal with a bad articulation. So we have to, again, shortchange our musical interpretation just simply for having a fingering that's difficult to recover from. At the very, very end, the last thing, it can be played fairly well with the normal fingerings. However, there's again another shortcut that can help you. When you play an F sharp, you can't play it as a B natural. It is really just a harmonic fingering that is raised by using antinodes in the right hand of the flute to sharpen up the actual pitch itself. But you could play, again, from the A sharp to a B natural. Again, you're going to have to move, if you're using the anchor fingerings in 36 to 37, you're going to have to move the thumb off of the A sharp key. But I definitely wouldn't use 1 and 1 or anything like that. That's going to be very cumbersome for you. And then as you recover off of the A sharp to B, this fingering, which can be really, really helpful, it's based on the old C sharp fingering that I learned when I was your age, which was very cumbersome in so many ways, because C sharp, of course, you can just simply play with the second finger in the left hand and the first finger in the right hand. But since I just played the D natural and the C sharp, I'm going to keep that third finger down, the anchorage, and I'm going to put my pinky on my C sharp key. I'm going to use this in preparation for the low octave C sharp that's about to come. I can play the C sharp with left hand 2, 4, 1, 3, and the low C sharp. And it'll pop right out. It's a really, really nice fingering for that. It'll save you a lot of effort in the end. And then the recovery, I've got those two fingers still down. Now, if you have an open hole French model flute, when you play the very last note, you can actually keep the C sharp key down and you hit the ring of the third finger. And the F sharp will be nice and in tune. It won't be playing flat for you. You don't then have to move any other fingers. Again, recovery time on this is what makes it either possible to play it at a nice tempo or makes it more difficult. So as you play the very end, and in that way I can put all my efforts to getting a little bit of vibrato color at the very end. For anyone who's listening and assessing these, hearing comfort, your ability to play this with a great deal of dexterity, with musical intent, is what will separate the performers who have this kind of training in their background in it from those who are just trying to get by playing the piece itself. So I hope all of this helps in your preparation for this next year's upcoming auditions. Phase 1 is coming up shortly, so best wishes in your practice and good luck.